This is David Duke. Hello, this is David Duke, and this is David Duke live web radio broadcast going all over the world. This program is a voice for European Americans about the issues confronting our people, truly on a worldwide basis. And I'm very happy that we have this medium. For the first time, we have a worldwide medium that can compete with the controlled mediums that we have in both America, England, France, Germany, and elsewhere around the world. I'm very happy and I'm honored to have with me as a guest today a very learned man who's written over 11 books on issues of importance to the European peoples. He has also written a lot about the Second World War and done documentaries and articles on that subject. He's written a lot about European ancient religious attitudes. He is a doctor of what is your exact
philosophy.
Doctor of philosophy. Well, every doctor is doctor of philosophy in America. He graduated from
Penn State in intellectual history.
In intellectual history. So that's your field and your doctorate. And so he's also been educated in Britain, I understand.
Yes, the University of Leeds. I did my master's.
So we have quite a scholar on with us, and I think he can offer a lot of insights into a lot of the key issues. And I must say that this man, the scholar that he is, and the tremendous academic credentials he brings to us, he's also one of the leading anti-Jewish supremacists. He's one of the leading people in the world that's exposing the dangers of Jewish supremacism. And he does so in an intellectual way, in an academic way, and that's so vital because the Jewish press is constantly trying to portray anyone who opposes their power or their machinations as terrible, ignorant people. And yet there are many people of fantastic education and learning who realize that Jewish supremacism is the ultimate threat, not only to the European people around the world, but to all peoples around the world. The globalism which they're advancing is literally attacking our society. So let me go ahead and introduce formally to you. He already gave you a couple of words, but introduce formally to you Dr. Alexander Jacob. And welcome to David Duke live web broadcast.
Thank you very much indeed.
So let me ask you a question. I guess our listeners would like to know. First off, they'd probably be interested to know how that you came in contact with me and how we got together to do this program to begin with. What was your? Tell us some of your history in the cause.
Quite. I specialized in idealistic philosophy, first natural philosophy and then political philosophy, and that is because of my background as an Indian. We in India have the most idealistic religious and philosophical tradition in the world, and having specialized in that, I discovered that it was mostly the Germans who had continued that tradition, especially in 19th century Germany. And this is a tradition that was translated politically into the conservatism of the early years of the 20th century, and that led to National Socialism ultimately. So this obviously has a bearing on the opposite of the idealistic tradition, and that is the Jewish. And so I'm very pleased to meet you, having written your work recently on Jewish problems. I also have translated a work on the Jewish problem by a German called Eugen Düring.
Mm-hmm. And how does that translate for our English speakers?
The book is available from England. It's called Eugen Düring on the Jews. Originally it was called The Jewish Question, Die Judenfrage. It was written late in the 19th century by a professor at the University of Berlin.
And so it's interesting, I think, for a lot of people, too, to understand that you're of Indian descent. Of course, I think we talked earlier, and I think you subscribe to what's the so-called Aryan theory of Indian history, and you understand the Indo-European aspect of that. But it shows to the world that people such as myself and many other so-called white nationalist leaders around the world, we're not in any way the stereotypical racist that the media tries to paint us. And there's many people of all different ethnic groups, even among the Caucasian element, the white element, and other elements around the world who are recognizing the dangers of Jewish supremacism. What obviously, how did you awaken? What was the nature of your awakening to the Jewish supremacist problem?
As I mentioned, it is a philosophical understanding, and having specialized in Indian and ancient Greek philosophy, I think the difference between that and the utter sterility of Judaism is so apparent.
You said that the ancient religious beliefs of the European peoples were more idealistic, and that the Jewish people were more materialistic. Could you explain what you mean by that to our listeners?
Well, yes. All of the ancient Indo-European and Aryan traditions are based on inner spiritual vision of the cosmos and of the microcosmos, that is the human organism, and tries to elevate the human microcosm to the level of the divinity, to give it a divine perspective, so that we improve our lives and live like gods. Whereas Judaism is the very opposite of it. It forbids all investigation of the higher aspects of man and forces him to make the most of the material world, and hence it becomes increasingly materialistic through the ages, and involved particularly with the acquisition of money, which it has mastered.
I've always heard that, and the interesting point is that I heard this from many Christian theologians as well, Christian theologians who recognize what Jewish supremacism and Judaism is all about, and they say that the reason why the Jews so hated Christ, of course, in their writings they say that Christ is being boiled in semen, and I know that sounds absolutely incredible and untrue to somebody who might be listening to the broadcast for the first time, but the Talmud does literally say this, and I can document and back that up. And they hated Jesus in every sense, and a lot of people say that Jesus was such a total opposite of really the Jewish tradition. He was an idealist in the sense of living a life for a higher purpose and not simply for material gain, whereas Judaism does not believe in an afterlife, if that's correct. In fact, they don't. In fact, most Jews, you ask, do you believe in an afterlife? They say, no, we don't. And that means simply a material gaining of power upon the earth.
Quite. I think that's absolutely true. The Jews are very, very limited in their intellect. Whatever their IQ scores may be, it will not do. We will always be higher than them because we have a spiritual dimension to our personality, which they are completely lacking in. And so to us there will always be mediocrities and dangerous mediocrities as well. Now, Christianity, I don't know what it was originally. It may have been a revolt against Orthodox Judaism. It may not have been, because Jesus still proclaimed his kinship with the line of David. So I'm not theologically sound on.
It's certainly an ideological break, but by every, if you look at the New Testament, it certainly is a huge ideological break with that of what we define Judaism. In fact, Judaism didn't even become having a codified state until 6 centuries after Christ. Now, whether or not again, there could be some common ties there, and maybe not. Of course, now we're getting into the area where you're going to find a lot of religious disagreement. I don't want to get much into that question too much.
Right. Since we're not so clear on that, what we are clear of is the development of Christianity amongst the European peoples. That is a totally different matter. No matter what the origins of Christianity were, it was developed in a very interesting way by the Church. It was the source of much interesting philosophy in the monasteries, and debate and investigation into a realm above the human. So whatever its origins were, it was a consolidating force and an elevating one in Europe, and one should be thankful for the early Christian church, the medieval church,
But do you see then like a parallel in the religious motif, for instance, of the paintings of Da Vinci and Michelangelo, then to the other European religious traditions such as the Hindu religion and other European religions? Do you see a commonality there, so some sort of link that's based on our common origins as a people?
Possibly. I mean, the art forms of India are Oriental, the art forms of Europe are Occidental, but they have, I suppose, the same religious aspect to them, and that is what distinguishes them. Judaism has no art form at all. The Semitic religions prescribe the depiction of the human form. Even Islam, I think, does that.
Profane images.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting view, and that's true in terms of the great art. Now, the Jews seem to dominate modern art, but modern art seems to be more or less a defilement of the human form. And,
right, and a deliberate one. It's a subversion of all the idealistic trends in Western art until the 20th century, and it's a monstrosity aimed at vilifying humanity, because it represents man in caricature most of the time.
We do seem to have a cult of ugliness, don't we, that dominates the West. So your awakening on the Jewish question came really from a very different perspective than most people. Most people come from a political, socioeconomic, even religious perspective, and you came really from a standpoint of a philosophical underpinning. And once you learned about this tremendous dichotomy, this tremendous difference between the philosophical underpinnings of Judaism and what we might call the European-style religions, or the Indo-European religions, then what was your next step in your awakening on that issue, on the Jewish question?
Well, I do what every scholar must do, and that is write about my field of specialization. And so I've translated those works from the German, which I thought most crucial in understanding the differences between the European way of thought, particularly the Germanic, because that was highly developed, and the Jewish. And so I translated works by Houston Stewart Chamberlain and another neoconservative thinker of the Weimar Republic called Edgar Julius Jung, a book called The Rule of the Inferior, because that was what the Weimar Republic was, the rule of the inferior, just as present-day American rule is also. And
rule of the lowest common denominator, right?
Indeed, yes, true communism.
So you're not a friend of democracy. Our founding fathers, Jefferson, and many of our other major founding fathers, Jefferson, Adams, all spoke, their biggest fear was what they called, quote, democracy. Today, democracy is enshrined as the great icon, the great god of government, and yet most of our founding fathers decried democracy as the greatest danger to human progress and prosperity. How do you see that? You were talking to me at lunch a little while earlier about the danger of democracy to the Western world, and in fact some of these other countries, including some of the Arabic countries. How do you define democracy, and how is democracy in that definition a danger to us?
Well, democracy in the classical sense is a fine thing. This is the Greek definition of the rule of the people. There, you had a small city-state which is more controllable, and you still did not have the abomination of the masses who form a majority and overturn society and politics through the elections.
Especially through the mass media and the manipulation of those masses.
Right. And the problem with today's so-called democracy is that it is not a democracy at all, and there is no power to any people. There is only increasing power to the oligarchy that controls all of politics and society. So this is just a mockery of democracy.
So you have 1% of the people, this is one theory, you have 1% of the people who control 99% of the media, 1% of the people who control 99% of the political money that goes on, the political influence, the connections in the media, and then they in turn manipulate masses of voters, and then this is called, quote, democracy and rule of the people, when it's really rule of that 1%.
Absolutely, and what is startling is that people continue to believe in this nonsense of democracy and the fight for democracy and freedom that's being propagated by the Americans today. It's incredible.
Well, when you speak of America, please understand, and I know you're not an American, I am, and most of our listeners are, though we have listeners all over the world. What's represented by George Bush and by the American government isn't the average view of the average American. Most Americans are absolutely opposed to the mass immigration that we're suffering from. They have a real sense of they want to preserve their culture. And every point on these major issues, Americans don't go along with the government. But Americans are absolutely mesmerized by the media, and I'm ashamed to say that they really show themselves very weak in standing up to the
right. Yes, I understand that, and I meant by Americans the American leadership, obviously, because they speak for the people, whether the people like it or not.
I'm really amazed that so many people around the world can make a distinction between what the terrible things the American government does as compared to what the American people are, but I find many people are able to do that. I'm always surprised when that happens. I understand anti-American sentiment around the world. I understand why it exists. And if I were a member of another country, for instance, and that America is trying to force their Judaistic and pro-Zionist position on us and these other globalistic positions, I would be very resentful of America, no question. But I'm an American, I'm also resentful.
Right, and I think that if you really want to separate yourself from the leadership, then you have to fight it to show that this is not representative of the people, and that it should not last. So there's some responsibility also here. If you want to dissociate yourselves from the government, then you have to make that clear somehow.
I think we do. Of course, I make that clear, and a lot of Americans try to make that clear. I do it every day of my life, and some of us pay a price for it, but it's got to be done. Yeah. Give us a perspective, because again, you're not American. You've been living for some time in Russia, going throughout Europe. Obviously you come from India. Give us perspective, a non-American perspective, for instance, of this entire American pro-Zionist, the pro-Iraq war, the actions Americans are taking right now against Syria and Iran. Give us a non-American perspective of that for our listeners, please.
I think it's absolutely diabolical what is happening in the Middle East, what's been happening for some years now, since the first Gulf War, in fact. All this vilification of Islam and the corresponding reaction that it produces is a monstrosity of modern politics. It's clear who the agents are behind the politics of present-day America, the neoconservatives. These people are not conservatives at all. They were originally communists and Trotskyists and socialists, and then moved to the right only when there were riots, race riots or something in the 60s, and they felt that their position was threatened. So we know that the people controlling American politics are fraudulent and perhaps even criminal. So,
do you think people of the world just find it amazing, like I as an American find it amazing, that former Trotskyites, communists, have taken over the so-called conservative movement in America? I mean, it's insane.
Well, anything is possible in America, it seems to me.
I got elected office, that may be true too.
With the media in your hands, you can do anything.
That's right. If you have the media on your side, you can literally create any abomination. Any sort of you can get away with anything. You can attack American ship, the Liberty, and the next day have billions of American dollars go to Israel. Same thing as if we were sending money to Japan after the attack on Pearl Harbor, would be the same equivalent. You can attack American installations in the Levant affair with terrorism and have money going to Israel the very next day. You can have Israel spy on us and money goes to Israel the next day. And as long as you got the media to cover up, a lot of people ask me, why did the Israelis attack the Liberty? Wasn't there a great risk, a downside this could be discovered? And of course ultimately it was discovered because of the courage of the men on the ship who were able to withstand this Jewish attack, intelligently rig the antennas to get some American flyby support, which caused Israel to break off. So they all didn't die. So there was they couldn't just put a total Jewish spin on the whole event. But people say, well, how can they do this with this risk? And they felt there wasn't that risk because they knew they'd have the Jewish media to cover up for them. They knew they could control Congress so much that they could even stop congressional investigation. At the same time the Liberty happened, we had the capture of the Pueblo ship, by the North Koreans. I mean, it's the same time span in which only one American died, not 23, not 178 wounded, not a vicious attack to sink the ship, but simply a capture of Americans. And there were huge congressional investigations on the Pueblo affair that lasted over a year and one half. In the Liberty case, there was never even a formal congressional investigation on a vicious terrorist attack against American forces. And most Americans don't even think of Israel that way. I mean, here's a country that has terroristically attacked America, and then we go and attack Iraq, which never did a single thing against this country.
Well, America has been colonized for some years by the Jews, so it's hardly surprising. This is, of course, especially true in the universities. They have all the leading positions there. The powers of influence are all Jewish. The way of thought has become almost fully Jewish. Their entertainment, everything, it's indoctrination from top to bottom. So it's not surprising that they get away with what they do politically as well, because there's not going to be any protest from the rest of the students or the society. So that is not surprising. But one thing that must be clear is that all these neoconservatives are only interested in the preservation of Israel, and so this cannot be an American concern. This is a Jewish one, and Americans should learn to see that this is not their problem and that they are being forced into a problem that is not theirs. I personally think that Israel has to be dismantled, because it is not only an injustice to the Palestinians, it is also the symbol of this unnatural religion that I was talking about earlier.
Oh, well, how is that a threat to us? Because it's a symbol of an unnatural religion.
Well, these so-called neoconservatives and Israelis are ambitious. Remember that they're only communists. The communists have always the world as their goal. That is an international system. Now it is called the One World Order, then it was called the Communist International.
New World Order, yeah.
And this means that the whole world will be ruled under the auspices of one temple from, Israel or somewhere.
But that's all. I believe that's true. But you have to realize, to most Americans, most people in the world, that sounds ludicrous. That
it is
these
not.
Jews actually. Well, I'm just saying that most people would view it as very ludicrous that this tiny number of Jews are trying to literally control the world, and it's some sort of messianic dream of world domination and control.
What does it look like when you see the wars that are being waged today by America for the Jews and for Israel? Does it look otherwise, or does it look like a confirmation of the fact?
Well, Americans, we see this now. A lot of Americans are learning this is a war where Americans are bleeding and dying and being maimed by the thousands in a war that's only hurting America. It's causing millions around the world to hate us, to want to commit terrorism against us. It's costing us hundreds of billions of dollars. In fact, it'll be trillions of dollars, because we've got to give medical care to all of our brave soldiers who suffered being maimed and crippled and injured in this war. For many of them, for the rest of their lives, we must take care of them. And it's going to cost billions. It's already cost billions of dollars in oil costs. So, yeah, I can see that. But let me ask you, does the rest of the world see this as American imperialism, or is it increasingly becoming known that this is not about American imperialism? This war is really about Israeli or Zionist imperialism.
It is Zionist.
But how does the world see that, from your perspective?
Well, I think the Muslim world is aware of the fact. The states that are allied to America for economic reasons are too afraid to declare it if they are aware of it. I think the Jewish plan is clear enough. What the others can do about it is another matter altogether. Well,
let me ask you this too: I just did an article on my website recently about Vladimir Putin and his effort to take down some of the oligarchs. the latest Yukos oligarchs, the Berezovsky, Guzinski, and others. And one of the interesting things is that many of these oligarchs who he's taking down are also citizens of Israel, and all of them have fled to the security of Israel. In fact, most of the Yukos stockholders now live of all places in Israel, and Israel shelters them. Is that one of the reasons why you think that it would be good for the world that if Israel dissolves as a so-called Jewish state and becomes a multi-plural state, as they always preach for everybody else, is because this center of this kind of chicanery and corruption would cease to exist? Is that one of your reasons that you would be in favor of that? Indeed,
that is certainly an important reason. More than that is the domination that Israel seeks through America of the world. They wish to establish their laws, their way of thought, their religious mentality on all of the world. Already in 1967, someone called Robert Beller wrote about civil religion in America, where he very clearly indicates that the new religion of America is something very much like Judaism. It's all about escaping Europe and going to the land of the free, the promised land, which is America, and so on and so forth, and then spreading that all
now
over
the
the world.
Holocaust is almost a new religion too.
Right.
And I've actually read some Jewish writers, some weird Jewish writers, talking about how that the Holocaust is the new story of redemption in God, that the Jews were tempted to be killed, but they rose back up, and now they're the shining example for humanity, and they're like the new gods.
Yeah.
And religion, the Holocaust doesn't the Holocaust have almost as a person who studied religion all your life, does the Holocaust, do you have a lot of religious connotations?
No, it has none at all. It is only a repetition of the punishment of the Jews in ancient Egypt by the Pharaoh. It's nothing new, it's nothing terribly interesting or significant for us, no matter how they may force it upon us as a religious symbol or whatever they like to think of it as.
Yeah, I was just reading even places such as Maine now, they're building so-called Holocaust centers and they're having teacher cutbacks. They can't afford to pay their teachers. They can't afford to pay the schools because of the tax problems in many states. But they went right through the Maine Senate and the House of Representatives or whatever, the Maine government, that the M-A-I-N-E, not Maine, the Maine state government, that they would spend $2.5 million on a Holocaust center and Holocaust studies. And it's almost like, they want every American child, and this is going on in Britain too as well, and this is going on in France and Germany, other countries, including parts of Italy. They want every child of the West, every child that's non-Jewish, to go through and experience and feel the Jewish sufferings, and basically almost like an immunity system, so that these children will be very resistant to any sort of discussion that in any way paints Jews as negative. Is that the reason why we're having this?
Horror. This is an absolute horror. We will not become Jewish, and we don't want to become something as horrible as that. If they want to celebrate Holocaust Day, they can do that in Israel. There is no need to celebrate it in America, where there was no Holocaust at all, or in any other part of the world where it did not occur. So there is really no question of the foolishness.
They have something like 2 or 3 million Americans every year go through the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and each of them are put on a little bracelet with the name of a Jew who supposedly died or whatever in the Holocaust, yes, to give them this sort of personal connection to it. I mean, it's just amazing the programming that's going on in terms of trying to make sure that our people don't have any natural defensive feelings. These people have literally taken over most of our government. They dominate our government. They dominate our media, and at the same time, they're trying to make it so that if anyone has any negative feeling about this, any natural, normal, defensive feeling that, oh, you're nothing but equivalent to a mass murderer or a killer, a Holocaust creator.
This is all sentimental nonsense. I don't think we should worry too much about their efforts at indoctrination. They tried communism in Russia. It did not work with all that indoctrination. I don't think this need succeed in America either.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. I mean, I've had a number of conversations with you over the last few months, and I find you at some point vacillating. At one point, you're very optimistic, and you say Jewish power can be taken off easy. Another point, you're very pessimistic. And of course, it's hard to be optimistic when you see the powers that exist in the world. But you were discussing something with me again earlier at lunch, and you mentioned the fact that the Jewish power is really a chimera. That in truth they are actually very, very weak, but we simply don't realize the fact that they're so weak. Could you share some of that with our audience today?
Well, we know that they're strawmen, but...
say that again? I didn't understand.
We know that they are strawmen, however rich they are. But the problem is a problem of education and understanding. Once they have control of the schools and the universities, not just in America, but in Europe and India and everywhere, because they all tend to imitate the American forms.
I see. Even some of the same textbooks and guides come
when the instruction is in English.
But just like the Hollywood media, the movies go out all over.
The movies, yes, everything. So when they have all of that, and the mind of the young being corrupted so early, then you have a real problem of reconversion to something like an authentic tradition. I don't deny that it's a serious problem. It's a global problem, in fact. But the problem in itself, the Jews that constitute it are weak in themselves. So it's just a matter of getting this understanding, and then you see that you are much stronger than they are.
Well, elaborate on that a little bit. I want to understand that concept more fully. Why don't you elaborate that? What do you mean getting people to understand that concept that they're weak?
Well, real strength is inner strength. It is psychological, it is spiritual, and the Jews do not have it. They have all the weaknesses and sicknesses of Freudian psychology, for instance.
Such as? Can you give me some examples?
Neuroses and psychoses.
Yeah.
That is their nature, which is so evident in their physiognomy, in their manner of speech, in their manner of action, and everything. It's a sort of paranoid sensibility. So this is their weakness. They're also developed intellectually, but without any depths, so that they will never attain to the richness of our cultures in Europe and India, or other parts of the world as well.
Give me some. Do you have any pertinent examples at the tip of your tongue on some of that? I mean, what do you mean they won't develop into the depth? Give me an example.
Well, you can see that all the trend of modern art and music, for instance, is a kind of minimalist, abstract tendency that really does not do justice to the human spirit. It's almost a travesty of art, of what we are fully capable of the art and music of the 19th century, for instance, or the centuries before it. They borrow European forms and then distort them and subvert them almost maliciously. The kind of wickedness that you will see throughout their participation in European culture, and not just the fine arts, but also in philosophy. They take Kantian philosophy and distort that, and then Hegel and distort it into communism, and on and on and on. It's a complete distortion. And then there's some Jew called Derrida,
well, they even distorted ethical socialism, which was a European tradition of people working together, into this distorted issue called communism or Marxism, which was a denial of every basic beautiful aspect of our culture, our families, our race, nationality, tradition. Everything was under attack under communism. They used an idea which appealed to certain people, workers, and a certain idea of social security that people wanted in a capitalist society, which, by the way, was often manipulated to a great extent by Jewish supremacists, and then they created this monstrosity called communism.
Correct, which is totalitarian and terroristic and horrible, and doomed to death. Yes. Now you mentioned the family. America has to do something to change itself, because the source of the modern day ills is America itself, because that's where the Jews are the strongest and influencing culture most powerfully. So Americans have to realize that they are not Jews. They are not children of Hollywood.
That's a great statement. I want everybody out there listening to this to listen to that statement again. Americans must realize that they are not Jews.
Quite, I mean, they've almost become that, without thinking, because all of their entertainment and their literature is provided by these people. So they have to go back to their origins. They're mostly Anglo-Saxon origins, and it's the 19th century and the works of that period, and recreate from that moment on, before this intervention, this hijacking of the nation took place in the 20th century.
Well, that again, my gift, if I have any gift, I've always brought some of these higher intellectual ideas and issues down to a common understanding for common people. And you're making me think right now of some examples of that. For instance, I notice even in the movement, and this is something that, if we're going to change the world, we white nationalists or we European traditionalists, if we're going to change the world, sometimes we have to start with changing ourselves. And all of us, including myself and all of us, we have some of this Jewishness in us, in the sense of how we behave. I mean, how many young whites, even who are racially conscious, still watch and almost worship the black basketball games and basketball players? Oh, they want to go to the basketball game and they want to support the team like the old Celtics, where they were mostly white, but at the same time they literally are stuck in this milieu that they've been taught about and trained about. They've listened so much to black music on the radio since they were small, they don't even realize they've been affected to some of these preferences. That's very, very common among white women, in fact, that you hear a lot of white women who are just like addicted to so-called soul music. And this isn't because they made some sort of conscious choice to do this. I mean, this became popular. You listen to things a long time, you get used to it, and you get that milieu. And all of us, I think, in the movement have to work very hard to try to free ourselves, our individual souls and spirits, from this corruption that we all experience growing up in this society that is thoroughly Judaized, in a sense.
Yes, instead of going to Holocaust museums, you can take trips to Europe to see, where you came from and see how different it is in Europe. No matter how controlled Europe may be politically, it's still the land of the original culture of the European peoples. And I think that would be useful rather than going to Auschwitz or Holocaust museums.
Well, I think it's so true. And I tell you, over the years, I've been in this fight now for many, many decades. And going to Europe just renews me. Of course, I'm doing a lot of work here and helping awaken my European brothers. And Jewish supremacism is now going into the German language, and the Spanish translation is almost finished for Spain. And you're right. I mean, going to Europe, I love the city of Salzburg, especially. I went to school there for a while, did some graduate studies there in the 1980s. And it's a city where Mozart was born, and every inch of that city you see art, you see culture, you see beauty, you see a sense of tradition. It's just incredible. And if you go there and you already have an inkling of who you are and where you come from, it can't help but renew you and energize you. So that was a great suggestion, Dr. Jacob. And by the way, I want to make something clear. Your name is Dr. Jacob, but you're actually fully Indian, Hindi. You're a Hindi, actually. And Jacob, some people might think, well, hey, Jacob's a Jewish name, sometimes a German name, but Jewish name. So could you explain that to our listeners so they understand what that is about?
The name was given because of the fact that my mother belonged to the ancient Syrian Orthodox Church that still exists in India. It's one of the early apostolic churches, and it's Christian. And she insisted that we have Christian names. My father, however,
so at that time, a lot of Indians took names, just like
the Bible.
Yeah, the Bible names, the same way people took first names here, like David or Samuel or whatever.
Correct. My father, however, was Hindu, and I myself am Hindu also.
Mm-hmm. But she was absolutely Syrian Orthodox Christian.
Yeah.
Well, that's important people to know, and it's important people to have an understanding of that. I mean, it's very important to know who's talking to us at all times.
Yeah.
It does affect our evaluation. Now, that doesn't mean I can't believe in listen to and learn from a Jewish person. There's a lot of Jewish people that I post on my site, but I want to know if they are, and I want to know, and I often want to look at their what they're saying in connection with that knowledge of their heritage, and see if there's a connection, or if there's any sort of binding there. I think we all have to be very wise today about what goes on and where things are coming from. So thanks for sharing that with us. Tell me some of your project. What is your current project that you're working on? You told me you were working on a book on cosmotheology, I believe.
Cosmology.
Cosmology.
It's a work that will be published at the end of next month in Germany, and it's a reconstruction of the solar cosmology of the ancient Indo-Europeans. This is the basis of all ancient religions, those religions that flourished before the invention of Judaism by Abraham, that which is against the ancient religions in every way, and continues to militate against these religions and the people who originally belonged to these religions.
Mm-hmm. Or do you put both Muslim and Judaism in that same category then?
Judaism is only a child. Islam is only a child of Judaism. It
in theory
shares many points with Judaism, though it developed differently, of course, and the differences are, I think, more racial. It is a religion that was adopted by Arabs mostly, whereas the Jews were Arameans and Hebrews. It's just that the Arabs developed their Semitic religion, Judaic religion differently, and so there's a difference in the significance of these two religions. Otherwise, they have much in common, I think.
Obviously they do. Most of the people say that Christianity is a diversion from that. In fact, the Muslims don't like Christianity because they say that it's multiple gods. You know, the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, and they say there's only one God. Tell me some about I'd really like to know, and I know our listeners would be interested to know, some of the religious beliefs of the ancient Indians. And a lot of people feel that's the core and the source of a lot of religious attitudes, ancient attitudes of the Europeans, is more clearly expressed there and in a more undiluted form there. Tell our listeners what's the basis of that religion, and what are some of the primary beliefs of those religions and their attitudes toward life and the world and the cosmos.
It is a deeply philosophical religion in the sense that it concentrates on the potential of the individual soul to expand itself into the divine. The divine soul is actually the soul of the cosmos itself. And so when you achieve a broader and wider perspective day by day, then you get a different viewpoint of not only your personal life but of world affairs also, and this is elevating, and this is the sort of perspective one ought to have. In everything one does, one should have a superior point of view, not that of the money-grubbing, pettifogging gangster, that has been made the model of modern day society.
Well, then, what is the real story then of that religious viewpoint? Again, I come from a Christian viewpoint, but obviously I'm very tolerant of any religious viewpoint among Europeans and Indo-European peoples around the world, and I think we must have respect for every point of view. I believe in complete religious freedom and freedom of speech. Sometimes people that tend to control Christianity and Islam and Judaism, they tend to try to suppress dissenting viewpoint to their own particular brand. I mean, you might have, for instance, you had tremendous wars and terrible bloodletting in Europe between one brand of Christianity, Protestantism, and compared to Catholicism. You had the great wars in which millions of Christians, both sides, died, and we seem to have that conflict that extends on to today. So my question is, how does the ancient Indo-European of you say Hindu faith, how does that deal with things such as individual moral conscience, individual freedoms and liberties of conscience and thought? How do they view things like heresy, blasphemy, those kinds of issues? Is the context a freer context than the monotheistic religions?
Monotheism is really only mononationalism. There is really no divinity in the Jewish God. So it's not monotheism.
What do you mean by that? I don't understand you. Explain to me.
There is no
divinity.
Spiritual focus in Judaism, as I said, because of the limitation of the Jewish intellect. So it never achieves the status of philosophy, let alone of a high religion. It is only a tribal deity devised by Abraham to keep his Hebrew people. Hebrew means migrant, by the way, a wandering person in the ancient language. And so these were mercenaries and brigands and so on in the Middle East, ancient Middle East. And so they were banded together by Abraham, who devised this religion in a fiercely nationalistic way. Everything now for the God of Israel and so on and so forth,
chosen people,
and the destruction of everybody around them, and so on. So it's mononationalism. It is not monotheism. There's no religion here. There's only politics.
Well, how does that contrast to, say, the Hindi?
The Indian and the Greek and so on religions are not political. They are just religions. They have a sense of their superiority, of course, Brahmanism, for instance, and so on. But this doesn't mean that they will go out and fight wars to bring everybody under their control. There is no need to, because their own eminence is an example that will sway others. They don't need to.
Well, the Greeks, of course, celebrated the idea of freedom of thought, freedom of philosophy, freedom to question. They respected the traditions and they wanted to maintain those traditions, but at the same time they really began the whole idea of so-called democracy in the sense of city-states. And of course, for them, of course, as we talked earlier, was democracy was an idea of people, you knew who you were voting for. Only basically the people of property and education could vote. You had a very educated voting group. You weren't controlled by money. You weren't controlled by media. You weren't controlled by alien forces. So do you think that kind of religious attitude lends itself more to a society of what we call, in the classical sense, freedom?
Yes. In order to be free, one ought to be completely disciplined, first of all, spiritually. Without that, there's no freedom at all. You'll just have the freedoms that are lent to you.
Okay, what do you mean by that? Explain that to our listeners. You must be disciplined to be free.
Yes, because all of human life is a conquest of one's passions, those elements that bring us down to the level of the beasts. So we are rather divine than animal, and we ought to cultivate the higher aspects of our life. That can be done only through strenuous understanding of our own personality and the world, and reorientation of our lives in an upward direction rather than a unthinking, brutal one. This is an effect of our philosophy, and it is a necessity of modern society that the young especially be more disciplined in their lives rather than allowing themselves to be fed any sort of nonsense by people who want their money.
Well, I think it's been said by many European philosophers and writers and theologians throughout history that true freedom does come from discipline. When you have the ability to control yourself, and this is what a child learns basically by first discipline by the parents, and then maybe in the military training or social training, schools, and once you gain control over this, over yourself, over your own impulses, and you can direct yourself as your will dictates, then you're truly free. If you're just totally subject to the world around you without discipline, then you're basically not a free person.
Correct. That's certainly true.
I'm trying to translate some of the things you say more intellectually for some of our people to more common parlance.
Yeah. ultimately it's freedom of the world, you see.
You're very intellectual, and
it's freedom,
challenging.
Freedom of the world, freedom of the material world, that which is dominated by Judaism. So it's a matter of being free of Judaism, in fact. Our freedom comes from our spiritual capacity, that which Judaism does not have. And so we can go above it, and we must. And,
okay, what's the difference, you think, in the relationship between Judaism and nature, and let's say, the Indo-European religions and nature?
Nature. Judaism has nothing to do with nature, it has to do with politics, the control of nature and of peoples. It has nothing to do with nature. It is not natural, it is an unnatural
do you think it's a natural anti-environmentalist religion, in the sense that it, like you say, it's like man overcoming nature instead of man being part of this life, this God plan that we have? Europeans certainly have done their fair share of polluting, but the only people on Earth that seem to be really working hard to prevent the pollution of the Earth, the destruction of the Amazon rainforest, seems at this point to be the European peoples. Obviously, if you have a totally driven people by mammon or gold or money, you don't give a damn about the Earth. If you can make money cutting down all the trees, the redwood trees in California, go do it. What relation do you see there in your theological studies?
There is no relation at all. When I meant nature, I did not mean nature in the term of trees and plants. I meant understanding of what nature is philosophically, that is the inner constitution of the world and the cosmos, not the preservation of trees and forests.
What's the relationship of a man in the Hindu faith to the trees and forest and the hills and the soul of the earth, say, compared to Judaism's relationship to these things? I'm trying to ask some questions and maybe way off base, but I'm just trying to determine from an outsider's view. I've read some of the Vedas, I've read some obviously Indian, but I want to just ask you these questions and just see what your responses are.
No, as I said, we strive to rise above the animal level. So the question of rising above the vegetable, does not arise. It's already below the animal. So we are not concerned with competing with nature or controlling it or anything. We are far above it already, and the only contest is between our animal life and our human and divine. So
you see yourself as far above nature, or a high element within nature? I mean, what's the? That's a good question. I want to make sure the translation gets over here. Yeah,
we know that the same life that infuses us also infuses plants and other animals, and so on. But that does not mean that we feel that we are the same as a plant or an animal.
Do you feel like you're a higher expression of the God force in the cosmos, or?
Quite. We are. We are the only people who know that we are higher. All the others remain at their own level. But as a religion, it is not concerned with the environment. This concern with the environment is completely modern. It's like sociology, environmental studies. All of this began in the 20th century, in the 60s, after the hippies revolution and so on. So it has nothing to do with religion at all. Certainly not with the most ancient, neither Indo-European nor Jewish.
When do you think the Indo-European, the historical Indo-European religious person, when does he feel closest to God, or this God force? When does he feel closest?
In the accomplishment of higher things. This is art and music and philosophy and everything that lifts man above himself. That is a divine experience.
The other day I went to the ballet in Moscow, and it was extremely incredible. It was in the Kremlin, and it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And you see these people, these maidens and gentlemen, these unbelievable dancing, great orchestra, fantastic music, and it's just almost unearthly. And you sit there, and the whole audience is in awe, and just absolutely in awe of this beauty. And you feel that you are witnessing something above man.
Yeah.
Above man. You feel that you're seeing something that has the spark of the divine in it. I see that in a great athletic endeavor. I see that in a great piece of music, or a person that can take the sound of the voice and just make a sound that can just thrill you all the way down to your spine in terms of your ideals and your beliefs and the things that go on. Is this what you're driving at? I mean, is this what you're referring to in terms of that divine, and that's trying to bring that divine out?
I'm suggesting that all of society should be geared to the accomplishment of such marvels. This should be the highest focus of society, the cultivation of the nation. It is not the acquisition of money that is important through any means possible, through constructing casinos, for instance. It is the cultivation of the personalities of the people. That is their responsibility as statesmen. So that would be, the rule of the best. Whereas now you have the rule of the worst, and the cultivation of just about anything in the name of money. So you have a complete chaos, a lack of direction, a lack of vision, and in order to improve it, you need to get rid of the system itself.
I really want to do some more discussion with Dr. Jacob here, and we will have a few more minutes of discussion. We're not going to take questions today, either on info1davidduke.com or on stormfront.org, but you're welcome to post your comments. I'd like to get your comments in emails, and I'll be happy to forward those emails to Dr. Jacob if you have any direct questions for him. If you send those emails to info1@davidduke.com, and if you post any of your comments, you're welcome to do so even while this program is being broadcast, and that's at stormfront.org. I'm finding the conversation very interesting, and I really have some areas I want to get in with them, so we won't do any questions or response to questions right now in this show. Hopefully I can have Dr. Jacob on sometime over the next few days before I leave Moscow. I'll be leaving shortly, and if that occurs, then we can do some questions and answers. Okay, I want to get now back into some of the more practical things and some of the issues, and because I really believe what you're talking about here are some of the most important essences of what we're really fighting for. People when they have a revolutionary dream or an idea, they have to have some sort of vision for which they're fighting. And I talk about this a lot. In My Awakening, I speak about it in many of my articles and many of my speeches. I have a vision. I have a vision that our media, our movies, should be teaching kids ideas such as honor and duty and courage and intellect. That instead of promoting things like smoking, which destroys the body, a healthy lifestyle, instead of promoting gratuitous and soulless sex, to have sex on a higher level of something that's real meaningful in terms of the procreation of our people, instead of promoting drug use like so many of the movies do, again, to promote health. It's just amazing to me that the media, the power of the media, could be such an unbelievably wonderful force for our people. It could actually bring us and raise the taste and raise the values and raise the artistic sense of our people, and yet it continuously drives us down into the mud. It drives us into the lowest, the only way I can put it, the lowest excrement of our enemies, and that's why what you said here resonates in my mind. Whether you're a Christian, whether you're Islamic, whether you're Hindi, whether you're Zoroastrian, whether you're Greek Orthodox or Catholic or Protestant, all of us do when we go see great art and music and the great aspects of our historical people. We feel this incredible closeness to God. I've always said, and I don't want people to take this as an anti-Christian comment, but I've always felt closer to God on a mountain peak than I have in any church. But at the same time, I've always felt close to God in those churches also that resonate with the art and the beauty. For instance, you go in the Sistine Chapel, or you go into the many fantastic Baroque and medieval chapels of Europe, and you're just overwhelmed with a sense of art and beauty and culture in those institutions. So I'd like you to expand on that a little bit, because I want our readers to get a real sense of what the Indian traditions are, because your religious traditions, and they were Indo-European traditions, have been maintained for thousands of years. They had much less alien influences. So you're getting something that is really kind of the core of our ancient peoples. Can you explain some other aspects of that religious viewpoint?
Well, yes, the Indian society still has a background that is about 8,000 years old or something, and so it has preserved those traditions well over the years. It's based on a caste system where the priestly caste rules society in conjunction with the nobles, the Kshatriyas. This is an aristocratic system, essentially, and it is now preserved only by the best families and only in a social way among themselves. Unfortunately, after the independence, we had democracy forced upon us, and so that is a source of dissolution, of corruption for the ancient Indian tradition. And
is there really a tremendous even discrimination going on against what they call the Brahmin class today in India, huh? And
yes.
The untouchables are now raised, and the highest classes are lowered, similar to most egalitarian systems in America.
Well, this is the greatest danger of mass democracy, which will eventually bring everybody down and ruin the world in one great bang. So we are stronger because it's in our blood, this ancient tradition. It's been longer in our blood than in most other peoples, and so it's not so easy to remove. So democracy or not, we will still remain Hindu. That is the attitude you should also have, that no matter what they go on about neoconservatism and the fight for democracy, you should feel yourselves still European, part of a larger, nobler international community of Indo-Europeans.
Right. And of course, we Americans are concerned about some of the outsourcing right now to India. We're concerned about some of the insourcing in terms of immigration. We're trying to preserve our individual ethnic viewpoints. And I know that you're no enemy of that thought, and that you believe that all ethnic groups should have a right to preserve their way of life. Am I correct?
Quite, and certainly not be allowed to dominate all others, as the Jews are trying at the moment to do.
Exactly. Yeah, you're quite an intellectual, doctor, and it's great to have you on. You also are very much acquainted with the writings of Savitri Devi, excuse me the pronunciation, but tell us some of the impact that she had on her writings had on your attitudes, your development. Did you admire her writing? Did you like the way she wrote?
I certainly enjoyed reading her writings. They give a glimpse into the period in which she wrote, that is during the war and after it, and it's certainly interesting for her original point of view. She's a nationalist, a fierce one. I did not learn from her, but I admire her work as such. Admire what she did as a woman, single woman during those troubled times, trying to preserve the European tradition, the Indian tradition. She lived in India ultimately, in spite of the forces that were at work to destroy the old world at that time.
Now you've done some actual, I think even video documentaries on the war. Dr. Fields has told me that the video documentaries you've done in the Second World War and National Socialism are some of the finest and the most powerful he's ever seen. Could you tell us about those videos, the names of them, and some more information about them so our listeners can see them for themselves and order them?
Yes, I did these films some years ago in a group that was interested in German history, and since I have a background in German history and politics and philosophy from that period, I wrote lectures that were illustrated, and now they're being distributed by Dr. Fields in America. I did several, but the ones he has are to do with the ideology, the thought of Alfred Rosenberg, who was the philosopher of National Socialism, and another one on William Joyce, who was a champion of German nationalism, even though he was Irish and British during the war, and then another on the art of the Reich. I think it's important to represent the German point of view, which has been completely expressed after the war, and this is why this is why I did those films, to provide in the English language the German ideology, how the Germans viewed the world, and why there was a problem with the Jews in the first place.
Because of this, and you say it's essentially a total view of philosophy of soul and spirit between the two races.
Correct.
When I was in Munich the last time, I did the so-called Hitler tour, which was a very anti-national socialist tour. But they took the participants, it was mainly British and American and some other French tourists, and they took us to some of the major places most of the time I've been before, but I wanted to hear the spiel that they want to give to these. And they took us to the museum, a great museum of art, Kunst, and they took us to the Museum of Modern Art, and they showed us these exhibits of this modern art that Hitler hated so much, and then they showed us some of the art that Hitler loved so much. And the tour guide was very adamant about, how this modern art is so good and so nice and so free, and this German art is so terrible and so sterile, but I could see the faces of all the participants in this tour. They looked at the so-called National Socialist art, this art that showed the beauty of the human body and the human spirit, and great scenes of nature and honor and glory and just the only thing I could say is just beauty, beautiful colors, beautiful expression, just like an idealization of mankind to a higher level. And then you looked at this other paintings that looked like excrement or something in a toilet wall, and this was held up to art. So you did a film about art. Tell me about the German art, about the artistic values of that era as compared to the era today.
Oh dear, I know that Hitler tried to develop German art along nationalistic lines during the Reich, but he was not naive. He himself knew that many of the artworks that he cultivated through German artists were not of the highest standard, and he never expected anything else, because a genius does not flourish at someone's commandment. He has to grow naturally, and it takes time. Just as the Third Reich could not be created in 10 years. The vision of that man was far greater than could be accomplished within a few human years. I think we all know that no matter what the limitations of the actual artists during that period may have been, the effort, the intention itself was a laudable one, and certainly his discouragement and his exclusion of all degenerate art has to be repeated today. There's no doubt about it.
But this is not anything that's necessarily endemic to Nazism as compared to Americanism, because I can tell you could show this art to any average American. In America, the old days, the average American has the same reaction to this art as Hitler had. Of course, nowadays our media would say it's got to be evil if Hitler was for it. I mean, if Hitler used toilet paper, you damn well can't use toilet paper, or you'll be committing a sin of being a Nazi or something. But I think that the art that they tried to express there and they tried to cultivate is exactly the kind of art that every European people around the world will try to cultivate naturally if they're not perverted and controlled by this Jewish media power.
Quite, especially in the works of the sculptors of that period, like Arno Breker and so forth. You see, a renaissance of the true European forms, similar in most respects to the great art of Italy, the Renaissance itself, or even ancient Greece, where it all began.
I interviewed and talked to a lot of the closest friends of Arno Breker. I was in fact supposed to meet Arno Breker before he died. Unfortunately, he died before that meeting could take place. But I have another good professor that I know at the University of Miami, who also had he's done some fine books on Arno Brecker, and talks about the beauty of art. And one comment he made in there, and I think this is consonant with what you've been saying here today, he made a comment. Arno Brecker once asked in this interview, how do you know when you see great art? And Brecker said, quote, he said, "Great art needs no critics." When you walk into a room where you have great art, everybody knows it's great art. Universally. They feel it. They see it. They comprehend it. They are overwhelmed by it. And it's so true. Great art does need no critics. And what's happened is that we now have these critics who are often alien to our culture with no artistic tradition, basically determining what we like and what we don't like.
Indeed. That is the colonization of the mind by the Jews in America and Britain and everywhere else that they are.
So what do you think, to close, and we're really out of time, we've gone a little bit over time here, and I really appreciate the time you spent with us today in this worldwide radio webcast. What do you think is the most important thing, and this may be a considered question, a long answered question, I don't know, or maybe a short one. What do you think is the most important thing we can do, those of us who are awake on this question, that we can do to bring about the changes that we desire on this planet?
As I said earlier, I think the first requirement is to realize that we are different from them, from those who attempt to control us, and also that we are stronger than they are, that all of their money is built on our spiritual and intellectual gifts.
That's an important issue. I love that. I love that phrase, that we are actually stronger than they. Please expound on that a little bit more before we come to the end of this program.
Well, I think already in the 19th century, Wagner pointed out, this is the great musician, whom everybody knows and loves, pointed out that the Jews had no specific musical talent of their own or artistic, and only a commercial one to deal in the great artistic products of the Europeans. And that has become increasingly true. Now, unfortunately, after the war and their total control of Europe, there is no more European art left, or music to deal with, to deal in, and so they simply have to.
Now they're giving us African art and African music.
Yeah, anything that they like. So the opposition, vital opposition between art and money, is so strong that you have to choose between one and the other. And it's a choice between life and death. I think the more enlightened one is, the clearer the choice is.
Yes. There's definitely clear choices. It's amazing how what Wagner talked about, over 100 years ago now, and what we deal with. I mean, every day we see the example of what he was talking about. I mean, who controls the recording industry today? The Geffen brothers and other people like that. And what do they foster upon us? I mean, the Super Bowl of not the last one, but the year ago was, the whole thing was dominated by gangster rap music. You go to MTV all over the world and you see gangster rap music, a bunch of Africans clutching their genitals, and this is supposed to be great art. This is supposed to be great music. This is what our children are supposed to listen to. And it's hard to believe that parents even allow their children to listen to these things. They have posters of these creatures on their bedroom walls. And at some point, and that's again the point again, that our revolution has got to come first within ourselves. Before we can change the world, we've got to clean up our own families, our own lives, our own flaws, and some of them are certainly instilled by the culture we live in. And maybe part of that is through the religious realm, or religious thought and spirit, and no matter what our ostensible religious affiliations are, whether it be Christian, Muslim, Hindi, or pagan, or whatever, Viking, whatever our feelings are, when we stand on those mountaintops and we stand among the beauty of our people and we see the beauty of our people expressed in art and music or read something in literature of great passion and glory, we really do have a connection there with God. And we do feel a connection with the forces of the universe, and a connection that we can't necessarily put into words, but one that we know exists, and one that we know gives our life meaning and purpose and gives us beauty. I'll close this program by a quote from Dostoevsky, whom I love very much, his writings. And he said, quote, "Only beauty can save us." And I truly believe that, and it's that conception of art and beauty that you talk about here, Dr. Jacob, and that you refer to in terms of your religious attitudes, that are the richest form of strength for our people today.
Yes. So it's all a matter of retaining one's discretion, even in the worst of democracies.
In the worst of democracies. Well, on that note, we'll part, and I'm very looking forward to having you again on the show, and tomorrow we'll have another great guest, or I'll simply do the questions and answers. I know that many people are trying to get those questions and answers in. I've got a tremendous response from the O'Reilly program. It still comes in. We've had over 10,000 unique responses now, visits to our website. I've gotten literally hundreds and hundreds of emails. If you're waiting for a personal response on those emails, I will try, but it's going to be a heck of a job. People are learning the truth, and I'm going to post some of those emails, those questions, and those comments, and my response to them on our website shortly. So I hope that you all will enjoy that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, and I look forward to joining you again tomorrow in the afternoon in the United States, in the evening in Europe, in the wee hours of the morning in Asia, Australia, New Zealand. Thank you so much. Look forward to talking with you again soon. And thank you again, Dr. Jacob.
You're welcome. Thank you.
This has been David Duke for Our Heritage and Our Freedom.